Hello, my name is Gigi Robinson. I am a full-time content creator, author, public speaker, and as I like to say, creatorpreneur. I focus on a lot of different things, but I originally got my start in the health advocacy world because of my lived patient experience dealing with hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, endometriosis, chronic migraines, and chronic fatigue and pain. And I started posting about it online in about 2019, I think. And I was so focused on sharing about my journey because I felt alone in it, and I realized I can't be alone in this. There's, however many billions of people on the planet, and at least in our country, in the United States, there's about 70% of our population living with a chronic illness. So I realized, okay, I'm not alone here. In fact, sharing this will probably make other people feel less alone. So I originally got my endometriosis diagnosis just almost a little less than 3 years ago. So that's the most recent one. But if we're going all the way back to my first diagnosis of hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, I was constantly getting injured, and luckily I lived in New York City and I had access to some really amazing doctors at New York Presbyterian, Cornell, and HSS. And one of the fellows in the emergency room, one of the times I got injured, was like, I think you really need to go and see this one pediatric orthopedist at HSS. So I went, and she says, yeah, I think you meet all the markers for EDS. Go see this geneticist at Cornell. So I went and saw the geneticist. She says, yes, checks out. And if you know, or if you don't know, for hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos, there's supposedly no genetic test for that. It's only based on a series of things that you can do physically and or things your parents can do physically to kind of see those markers. I'm not sure what has changed in the past 15 years in terms of getting that diagnosis, but at least to my knowledge, it's based on the hypermobility scale. It has a specific name, but I'm not sure what it's called. And I guess I fell into it. And so that became the original source of my chronic pain and fatigue. But as I got older and through my adolescence and through my teenage years, I honestly started to feel a lot more chronic pain, chronic fatigue, cyclical pain, and no one really thought of endometriosis. It actually wasn't until I had graduated college, which I was struggling immensely with to deal with my health and manage my pain during college. It wasn't until COVID happened and I came back to New York City from LA, where I was in school, and I went to this specific pain management doctor at Columbia, and I went through a bunch of different treatments with her, steroid injections, acupuncture, so on and so forth, and medication and massage therapy. And all of a sudden, I mean, I say all of a sudden, but after 2 years of trying to figure out what was going on, I ultimately decided, well, she recommended and I decided to move forward with the diagnostic laparoscopy and to see if I had endometriosis. And I actually took a year and a half to even schedule the surgery because it is really this challenging thing to grapple with of, do I want to have a surgery where there's a 10% chance I have this? I mean, how likely can that really be? But if you're in the room of 100 people, there's 10 women there that probably struggle with it. And they're actually supposedly finding that more people struggle with endometriosis than they even talk about or that is even researched or polled. So it's probably more. And I went forward with it. And, I had all the symptoms, stomach problems that were unexplained by the GI doctor. Everything looks fine for the most part. Maybe you have a little stomach acid issue, but is what it is. They couldn't really figure out the cause of my migraines, which again, were very cyclical and with aura. So very aligned with endometriosis symptoms. Horrible, horrible lower back pain. And ultimately getting that diagnosis, I think, really shaped the way that I was able to start healing. Back then, I think that was just as the internet was going out. And I remember we that was when Facebook groups started. And so having access to support groups of people living with this was really helpful. But the rare thing about EDS or with endometriosis is actually not the condition itself, but to be diagnosed early on before it's a problem. A lot of people with EDS get diagnosed with like fibromyalgia or MS, and they're going through treatments for a while that are not helping. And I think part of that issue is also because there's no real treatment for endo or EDS. So it's just kind of an interesting mix there. I think the journey was you need to get this exploratory surgery, period. And I mean, nobody was forcing me, but it was definitely a you should get this surgery to see if, there's any way that you have this, because we think that in doing this surgery, there's a high likelihood that you do have endo. And if you have endo, then we can figure out a treatment plan for you. And ultimately, the doctors are there to help you find a treatment plan. That's the caveat is, a lot of times doctors are not necessarily trying to understand the root cause, and they don't even understand the root cause of endometriosis. They just understand that it happens. And so how can we alleviate some of those symptoms is really what we were focused on. And for me, that included surgery. So I saw 3 different doctors within that year and a half, and I just made the decision to go with one of the doctors that I saw. Same way for my breast reduction, I saw 3 different doctors. I think it's very important to see at least 2 doctors and get second opinions, get opinions from your PCP about it, see what other people on your care team are thinking. Because if you just go to one doctor and they're like, yeah, you should get the surgery, you move forward with it, and you don't really consult your other care team, which a lot of people living with EDS have multiple different doctors. I mean, I've seen everything under the sun for the most part, from a rheumatologist, an endocrinologist, to an anesthesiologist, gastroenterologist, neurologist. I mean, I've seen all of these different kinds of doctors to manage the EDS. And when I would see these doctors as I was deciding if I wanted to have surgery or not, they all said, yeah, I think this is a good next step. Because at that point, I had already been through a number of other tests that came back as normal. And when they come back as normal, it's almost like so defeating. But I decided to just push myself to continue to find an answer. And that was honestly the journey. And I mean, I think there's also a lot of uncertainty when you get the surgery. There's either a yes or no answer. I mean, there really isn't anything in between. So that is my story of how I got the surgery. I mean, I don't remember exactly, but I think it's a 2 to 4 hour surgery. I'm not 100% sure. I went in early and was out by 4 o'clock, I think, and maybe earlier. And essentially the endosurgery, it's a very common procedure, a laparoscopic surgery. So they make 4 or 5 keyhole incisions in your abdomen, and then they supposedly fill your cavity up with gas so they can look around. And then they excise or do the ablation on certain areas where they see the endometriosis, and then they stitch you up, and then they send you home. And that's how it works. Again, I'm not a doctor, so I can't speak to how it's actually done, but I believe they also use different kinds of tools and whatnot. I mean, their hands are not actually cutting. They're using some kind of robotic thing. Yeah, that's what I know about that. And I think the recovery for that surgery was really challenging. It was definitely a very painful experience. I think it took me about eight weeks to start feeling better. And it was a process. It was a journey. And honestly, also getting used to the aesthetics afterwards and how your body is, and depending on where they've excised different parts of the endometriosis, for example, on a bowel or a bladder, other things will be affected, like drinking caffeine, drinking soda, anything sweet, anything acidic. It's almost like a lemon being squeezed on an open wound. So it's internal and it's very painful. And that's something I think not a lot of people talk about when it comes to side effects of the surgery, but it was a challenge for me. And also, the gas leaving your body is like the worst pain ever. It's not the incisions themselves, it's the fact that it's internal. They've moved things around internally and that kind of hurts a little, but really that gas leaving your body. Yeah, it was extremely painful. And I've also gotten a breast reduction, and I can tell you the endosurgery was so much more painful of a recovery. Even though the breast reduction took longer for the wounds to close because of the hypermobile EDS and how my skin heals. For some people, their skin heals like right away. But for me with the EDS, it just took a couple months, but it wasn't painful, versus the endosurgery is a painful recovery. Because of that surgery, I am now able to feel endorphins when I exercise, which is something I have talked about a lot. I have experienced a lot of chronic pain and fatigue. I used to not understand why people exercised because it was so painful. And after that surgery, all of a sudden I'm able to exercise and feel endorphins. And I'm like, what is this? Like, this is what all you people are feeling this whole time? And just sticking to that and knowing that if I eat gluten, I'm going to feel inflamed. If I drink caffeine, my bladder might hurt. If I drink soda, my bladder might hurt. If I eat something acidic, also my bladder and bowel might hurt. And just also eating, I was actually vegan and gluten-free for the first 2 years after surgery. I only recently started eating protein again, but eating on a vegan diet for the time being was very helpful because it's less challenging for your digestive system to break down plant protein and plant-based foods, because that's just how your gut works. Apparently, at least this is what I've been told, plants stay in your system for about 24 hours versus animal protein can stay in your system for up to a week. So in terms of the digestion, breaking things down, it was less harsh on my digestive system, which in turn I think helped my healing process. Same with the gluten. It was really helpful for lack of inflammation. And I really don't eat gluten that much these days. If I am eating it, it would be like a sourdough. It's not going to be a regular piece of white bread. And I also think being mindful and baking your own bread or getting bread from a local bakery or from a farm is going to be far better than buying it from the grocery store. Yeah, it was a trial and error. I think, there's a lot of stuff out there on the internet, to put it lightly, that can be very misleading and kind of fearmonger. And, there's a lot of these crazy diets like the FODMAP diet or the AIP diet. And I think all of those diets are great if you stick to them and it works for you. But what worked for me was simply meeting myself where I'm at and knowing that if and when I decide to eat gluten, I will feel a certain way. If and when I decide to reintroduce animal protein in my body, it's not that I'm going to have a bad reaction. It's that it just may take longer for me to digest. And maybe that means I need to up my fiber intake when I'm eating animal protein. So it's really an adjustment. And I think also just really looking into and understanding the benefits of organic versus, non-organic, or washing the fruits and vegetables and how much that matters, or getting rid of processed food in your diet and making things from scratch instead of buying them out of a box. I mean, is that realistic all the time? No. I think there's an 80-20 here. 80% of the time, do your best to eat how you can, And 20% of the time, the times where you're eating out, the times where maybe you're in your cycle and you just want to eat 5 cookies, like go for it. For the most part, I think I really try to be very intuitive and intentional in what I'm eating and knowing and having the mindset shift, not that I'm on a diet, but that I'm eating for my health and my longevity and my productivity. If I know for a fact, if I carb up in the morning, it is not going to work for me. In the middle of the day, I'm going to get sugar cravings. I'm going to want to eat more. I'm going to not be focused. So I have to eat a very high protein breakfast. I eat a light lunch, and then I also eat like a light-ish dinner. If I eat too much at night, I need to fall asleep right away. So it's these little things that I notice about my body, whether it's changing the ratio of carbs to vegetables, carbs to protein, all of these things I'm still testing out and learning. And I think it is a learning process because our bodies are so individual. Just because I live with endo and I eat a certain way doesn't mean that Susie, who lives with endo, if she ate the same way, it may not work for her. Susie may also have, celiac, and so she actually can't eat gluten, or maybe, she wants to eat dairy and I can't eat dairy. So I think it's definitely all about them. So yeah. Yeah, I have absolutely loved Breathwork. It has been something I've been working on and with for quite a bit. I have some recommendations of two or three people that have really changed my life when it comes to breathwork. One is named Avi Greenberg, another Sandy Abrams, and another Dr. David Spiegel at Stanford. And I actually released endometriosis protocol with Dr. David Spiegel, and it's a self-hypnosis for pain management living with endometriosis, but you can do it any which way. And we actually did a sit-down 60-minute session where we talked about pain management and chronic illness and endometriosis, but also we did a live hypnosis with him virtually, which was really, really cool. And self-hypnosis is really breathing a certain way and focusing intentionally on different areas of your brain and putting focus somewhere, not to discredit the pain that you're feeling, but almost to place your focus somewhere else so that it can alleviate some of that pain. And I mean, for me, a big thing is, well, I'm sure you got patients all the time who you help them with their chronic pain and all of a sudden they're being told they're a hypochondriac because you're able to just breathe and hypnotize them to not have pain. And I believe in the interview, he explains how it's not that the pain is not there. The pain is there. It's your focus in your brain that you're able to almost turn on and off that light switch, which is you have to focus on it. It's a very conscious thing you have to do. And if you practice it more and more, it can help with your overall pain management. And again, it's not to say the pain is not there. It's not to say there's not a problem. For example, I did this when I think I was dealing with the symptoms of either an endo flare-up or a herniated disc, unclear which. And I was able in that session to get my pain from about a 6, where sitting down was extremely painful, to almost a 0. And it was so shocking to me. I was like, this is crazy. I've never experienced this. And at the same time, I think about my experience with breathwork, where I have this moment where I am really just focused on my breath and my body scan. Where am I feeling tension in my body? Where is there any pain in my body? And being led through breathwork sessions by my friends in the industry has just been such a blessing, because I realize breathwork is simply another tool in your toolbox. The same way acupuncture is, the same way physical therapy is, the same way medication is. And you can choose any number of those. I've done all of those things. I've done sauna, I've done cold plunge, I've tried all of these different things. And the one thing that also, aside from helping my pain, helps my stress. And if my stress is low, my inflammation and my pain is usually lower. So it's almost like this beautiful cycle or ecosystem where if you're able to calm yourself down and really return to that breath, because they always say in breathwork, the one thing we have from the moment we're born to the moment we die is our breath. And it's really powerful to think of and to think, wow, I actually have some control over this. I can control how I breathe, when I breathe, the different ways the breath makes my body feel. And that's beautiful and that's amazing. And again, as a result, I think it just makes me more aware of my body. And because of that, it can allow you to figure out when, maybe if you're having a flare up, oh, I think I should take 20 minutes maybe just to breathe or just to do this meditation and see how I feel after. Or maybe you're having a really great time and life is really good and you're like, whoa, I feel myself speeding up so much. I'm getting so much stress. I should take a minute. And I think that it's just been a really, really helpful tool. And even practices like yoga, if you're able, a lot of the time for endometriosis specifically, they recommend very low impact workouts like yoga, like bar, and like Pilates, because it is so focused on the breath. It's moments of a lot of assertion of your body, of your energy and your breath, and then moments of release. And something I've been doing lately, because I finally am in a position where I'm feeling great when I exercise, is a lot of hot yoga. And in hot yoga, you're focused on generating a lot of heat. And as you're doing that, you're breathing harder like that. And you're breathing like that for 45 minutes so that when they go, okay, here's your last pose, you go, okay, I'm going to go all out. And then you release. And that release, it's like you feel all that oxygenated blood going throughout your body, and it actually feels amazing. And you, again, yes, you could do it with yoga and Pilates and bar class and whatever other exercise classes you want to do. And those involve physical movement, but you can also do this lying down or sitting down. I think my words of advice are to find what works for you. There's the same way that, no one can really be your guru or your shaman on life, right? Figure out what works for you, because it's so individual. Health is so individual. And again, what works for me is not going to work for the next person. And finding people in your life that support you in your health journey is really important. I've been there when there hasn't been very nice people around me, and I've been there when there's been really supportive people around me. And I think the latter is better. So if there's anyone that's not believing you, just say, I don't really understand. I'm happy to answer questions. I mean, even when I first started dating my boyfriend, it's like, if you have questions about endometriosis, ask me. If you have questions about EDS, ask me. I may not always be able to carry all the groceries. I may always rely on you for that. And that's something I'm fine with. But that doesn't mean I can't go for a hike, or I can't do this, or I can't do that. But also, if I'm really not feeling well, I may just skip it. And that's fine. And that will be my me time. And you can go do your exercise. And that is what it is. And I think just having those realistic expectations and appreciations is really important. And my hope is also that, I know my story is very inspirational to a lot of people. And at the same time, there's people that don't have it as good and they're unable to get the care and the treatment. And I think the biggest piece of advice I have is to keep pushing, to keep asking your doctors for the peer-to-peer reviews so that your insurance can cover things. Do your research. And again, back to what I said before, ask your doctor what they're going to be doing in their surgery and what that's going to look like. Talk about the recovery. Have a plan.